This is Classic FM from Global.
It's a very exciting event this week, the BAFTA Games Awards. We're celebrating the very best games of the past year, starting with Helldivers 2.
Next Level with DanTDM. This is Classic FM.
First up, we had A Cup of Liberty from Helldivers 2, and that was by Wilbert Roger II, followed by Astrobot, Frightfully Fun by Tadashi Yatabe. And that's a good title for the track because it is a totally fun game. And I wanted to start with those two because they're both up for Best Game at this year's ceremony, which is happening on Tuesday. Not only that, but Helldivers 2 has 5 nominations in total this year, and Astrobot is up for a whopping 8 awards at this year's event. But I am getting ahead of myself. Hello and welcome back to Next Level. This is where we play the very best of orchestral video game music. And you might have seen the news this week that I am sticking around for a bit longer at Classic FM. I have loved spending my Saturday evenings with you, so I've decided to continue bringing you the best gaming soundtracks around, and thank you so much for coming along for the ride. So let's get straight back into the music. We are in the Best Game category, which has 5 nominees, including The Legend of Zelda: Echoes of Wisdom. But sadly, that music hasn't been released yet, and I'll play it for you as soon as I can. The next release, which is up for Best Game, is surreal and a bit slapstick. It's set in the UK in a fictitious northern town where you go around helping the characters do odd jobs. The music has a really old school feel, and if I had to describe it in one word, it would be ambling. Each track gives you the feel of trundling through town at your own pace, which matches the game to a T. The score is by James Carbutt, who says, "I drew the pictures, made the music, and wrote any jokes that weren't funny in Thank Goodness You're Here." Let's have a listen.
Next Level with DanTDM
on Classic FM.
First up, we had James Carbut's Rain or Shine from the game Thank Goodness You're Here, and then it was Celestial Theme by Louis F., and that was from the poker game Balatro, which you can play on your phone and has 4 nominations at the BAFTA Games Awards this Tuesday. The final release in the Best Game category is Black Myth Wukong. Now, we've discussed difficult games before, such as Elden Ring, and this one is very much the same. I started playing this and making progress, thinking I was pretty good at it, seeing as everyone else said it was hard. Then I hit the hard parts. At least while I'm getting destroyed by the game, there are some epic soundtracks playing in the background. Here is Unfinished, playing on Classic FM. That was Unfinished from the game Black Myth Wukong, played by the International Master Philharmonic Orchestra and written by Wang Jinghe and Li Jiaqi. You're listening to Classic FM, where we're looking ahead to the BAFTA Games Awards happening this week. These awards are so important for the industry. BAFTA is a hugely respected organization, and them giving recognition to the talent and hard work that goes into making these pieces of art is crucial. It kind of goes hand in hand with what we're trying to do with this show, to get more respect on board for the people that make these games. So, I wanted to share music from all the Best Music nominees tonight, seeing as that feels like a pretty important category. We've already heard from Astrobot, Black Myth, and Helldivers 2, which have all made the shortlist. Now here's the score from the latest Final Fantasy game, which is one of the contenders. That was Final Fantasy VII Rebirth's main theme by Shotaro Shimmer. And I played that for Jack in Exeter, who says he went to see the Royal Philharmonic Concert Orchestra performing music from that game at the Royal Albert Hall last year. Apparently, he went to see them twice, so it must have been good. And if you want to be like Jack, please do get in touch via the Classic FM website. Just find the Next Level page and fill in the contact form at the bottom. The next game I want to chat to you about has the most nominations out of everyone this year. Senua's Saga Hellblade 2, it has 11 in total. And the music on the soundtrack was performed by an experimental folk band from Denmark called Heilung, which is kind of appropriate for a game about Vikings. They're weird and wonderful, and you won't have heard anything like this on Classic FM before. What a powerful piece. I kind of wish that the first section was longer. I do have a soft spot for anything that combines vocals and orchestra, and this one is great. The ending definitely caught me off guard though, very intense. That was music from Hellblade 2 performed by Heilung. The audio director for the game was David Garcia Diaz. Now, the composer Wilbert Roger II has already had a mention on Classic FM this evening. He's the only composer who has made it into the shortlist twice this year for his work on Helldivers 2 and Star Wars Outlaws. He fell in love with the piano when he was just 4 years old and began his classical training then. Fast forward to the end of last year when he got a Grammy nomination for Star Wars Outlaws, and now is his second time to shine at the BAFTAs. Take it away, Wilbert Roger. Battle of the Revelator by Wilbert Roget from Star Wars Outlaws. And I'm dedicating that to the coolest Classic FM listener around, Adam in Glasgow. He says, huge fan of Next Level. As a professional flute player and avid gaming geek, this is the perfect blend of my lives. Adam then tells me that he played the piccolo on that very Outlaws track, which is incredible. What a great credit to have. Thank you so much for getting in touch with this fantastic track. Coming up before 10 o'clock on Next Level, we're going to hear some of the amazing British games which are up for awards on Tuesday. And next, I'll reveal which incredible composer will receive the prestigious fellowship at the BAFTA Games Awards ceremony. She's actually one of our favourites on Next Level, and I think you're going to love her track that I've chosen.
Classic FM.
The way you eat a cream egg says everything about you. If you eat yours by cracking it open like an egg, that means you're a bit punchy. You don't whisper in the cinema. You've been known to cut your own fringe. You don't keep receipts. And never get jet lag. Woohoo! Search Cream Egg Test to find out who you really are. Cadbury Cream Egg. How do you eat yours?
Hey Sainsbury's, my family's proper picky. How can I please them all without it costing an arm and a leg this Easter?
We've got prices to suit every taste. Set your table at selected Easter mains like lamb, beef or salmon, now half price with Nectar.
Nice. With those prices, I might have to pick all three.
For cracking savings this Easter, ask Sainsbury's. Sainsbury's, good food for all of us.
Nectar required subject to availability. Selected stores excludes locals. Ends 22nd of April. See in-store online for details.
Meet Jamal.
Hey.
Jamal's just reversed into another car. And of all the people...
Oh, no.
It's his ex. How's he going to deal with this awkward situation? Thankfully, Jamal's got car insurance with Aviva. If you've had an accident, we'll talk to everyone else involved so you won't have to, Jamal.
Phew.
Helping you put the pieces together to get you back on track. It takes Aviva. Get a quote today at aviva.co.uk.
This spring, transform your home in a flash with Hillary's. Get up to 40% off hundreds of made-to-measure styles. Plus, in our flash event, get an extra 10% off everything until the 17th of April, including an extra 10% off all blinds, curtains, shutters and awnings in our sale. And with Hillary's, measuring and fitting is always included. Book your appointment today. Visit hillarys.co.uk. But be quick. Extra 10% off everything ends the 17th of April. Conditions apply.
And off we go. When you're a small business owner like me, every day is an adventure. It can get pretty wild out there, but I'm used to fierce competition. So I feel in my natural habitat, out here on safari.
With an American Express business card, spend securely and earn points on business transactions to put towards a dream holiday.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
The card is for business, the points are for pleasure. Search Amex Business Card. Terms and annual fees apply. 18 plus, subject to status.
I've got the new Samsung Galaxy S25 and so many brownie points. You see, Now Brief with Galaxy AI learns my schedule to keep me ahead of my day. Weather, activity stats, and diary updates like Janie's birthday.
Oh, you remembered.
Thanks, Now Brief. Buy the Galaxy S25 on O2 by 4th of June and claim a Galaxy Chromebook Go worth £299. Selected languages only. Account login and network connection required. Claim a Galaxy Chromebook Go in Titan Grey from Samsung within 30 days of purchase. Terms apply.
Next Level with DanTDM.
On Classic FM.
That was March Caprice for piano and orchestra from Kingdom Hearts, played by the New Japan Philharmonic Orchestra and written by the newest BAFTA fellow, Yoko Shimomura. She's an iconic composer who has forged the way for women in a male-dominated industry, so I'm really happy to hear that she's getting this award. I'm DanTDM, and on Next Level, we love giving a platform to the huge blockbuster games as well as the indies. In a moment on Classic FM, you'll hear music from the ever-popular Call of Duty franchise, but one of the lesser-known games that is sweeping up at this year's BAFTA Awards is Animal Well. It's a quirky platformer featuring strange puzzles and, you've probably guessed, animals. It's made by a single person, Billy Basso, and I just love the visual style of it. It kind of reminds me of Undertale in a way. The track that I've chosen here really brings out a feeling of hopefulness, which is impressive considering the minimal amount of instruments being used. It's a really clever piece. Let me know what you think.
Next Level with DanTDM
on Classic FM.
First up, we had Flames from Animal Well by Billy Basso, and following that was the soundtrack to Call of Duty Black Ops 6 by Jack Wall. And you know I love any opportunity to introduce the Mario world to Classic FM, and the Mario Party franchise is one of my favorites. From the Nintendo 64 to now, and I think that Jamboree is one of the best ones yet. Fast-paced mini-games mixed with a crazy set of board games makes for such a fun game, especially with family and friends. That was Boss Minigame from Super Mario Party Jamboree, which is nominated in the Best Family Game category and the Best Multiplayer Game category at the BAFTAs. Music was written by Shigenobu Okawa. Hosting this show all about BAFTA gives me the perfect opportunity to play a soundtrack that I really enjoyed hearing the first time around. We featured it on International Women's Day because of the composer Neinita Desai. The team at Surgeon Studios are up for 2 awards this week. The game is Tales of Kenzira Zhao, and I'd love to know if you've had a chance to play this one yet, because the visuals are really beautiful. This is Every Story Begins at the End of Another on Classic FM. That was Every Story Begins at the End of Another by Neinita Desai from Tales of Kenzera Zhao. Thank you so much for hanging out with me tonight. It was really interesting to have a look at the nominations for this year's BAFTA Game Awards. I wasn't familiar with all the games, so it was a good chance to listen to some new amazing soundtracks. And if you're looking for a bit of peace on your Saturday evening, then stay locked into Classic FM for calm classics after 10 p.m. And to get you in the mood for Mylene's show, I wanted to finish up this evening with a selection of chilled out music, all from the Best British Game category. You're going to hear a cut from a Highland song, which is a wild adventure through the Scottish Highlands, and I'll also play Still Wakes the Deep, another Scottish game which is set on an oil rig and has swept up 8 nominations this year in BAFTA's shortlist. But first, this is music from Paper Trail. If you're finishing school this year and are about to head out on your own next adventure, this might be the game for you. It's all about leaving home, set in a world made entirely from paper. The music is by singer Claudie Makela, and it's astonishing.
the most relaxing music.
Classic FM.
Classic FM.
That was music by Jason Graves for Still Wakes the Deep, up for 8 nominations. Then you heard the Scottish-inspired Highland song composed by Lawrence Chapman, and before that, I played Claudie Macula's score for Paper Trail. Big thank you to BAFTA for helping us to put this show together. The winners of each category will be announced on Tuesday evening. All that's left for me to say is thanks for joining me tonight, and I'll see you next week on Classic FM. The next show is going to be a fun one. We're comparing really stressful games with super chilled ones. Join me from 9 next Saturday.
Classic FM.